I am delighted, having been to GothCon and wisely cruised into one of the retailer spaces, particularly those specializing in lines of older game titles, and going to the boxes with the lesser known material in them and basically being up to my elbows in those boxes for some time to produce in my hands. Who knew? Who knew it was a fantasy heartbreaker that I had never heard of or seen, which is Proteus, published in 1990. Oh, where was it? Is it two? Yes, 1992. So right there in that first wave with Dark Earth Legends and Legendary Lives and Hamabrea. So I am absolutely thrilled. I seized it and was foolish enough not flipping through it and walked right past, in the very same room, right past the table with a bunch of D30s sitting on them. I own no D30 and was unaware that I would want one upon playing Proteus, which utilizes such a die, which at that time, I'm not quite sure when it was, invented or became a thing for casual conversation and observed use, but I think it was around at that point. So at the time, this was new die. Okay, we're using that thing. Well, what to say about Proteus in preparation for showing you a little play? It is it's very inspiring to see it. In a little bit humbling in the sense that the style of writing and a great deal of the systemic and creative priorities seems so familiar to me. Bruce Gomez, the author, it's listed as Bruce Gomez and Duncan Barrow, and the company is Bruce Gomez Industries. He and I, who knows, maybe we would have, been huge meeting of minds 30 years ago. Or maybe we would have, as late 20s, I suspect him as well, might have had some sort of ridiculous posturing rivalry or, whatever. But the point is that you read this, and then I look at my original version of Grey Magic, which evolved much later into Circle of Hands, and I look at that, and they are really of a piece. There is a way of looking at role-playing. There is a way of desiring something in role-playing. There is a deep belief in systemic approaches to facilitate that, and many of the details, the energy-powered magic, and a number of other things, which, of course, have certain affinities to Magic the Gathering, but also reaching into specific details of RuneQuest and a few other things like that. There's just a lot in common. It's very much its own thing. It's got the playful qualities that I like in a lot of these. And we could contrast the rather serious and, I think, authentically metal qualities of Dark Earth. Basically saying, you want your Moorcock token hybrid, I'll give you a Moorcock token hybrid, and going to town, with furrowed brow and white knuckles, versus the Legendary Lives approach, which is extremely whimsical, and Hamabrea has elements of that as well. And Proteus leans more in that direction, particularly in terms of setting. Legendary Lives surprised me in application because on paper the setting looks pretty shallow, and it looks like there's hats there. There's the Oriental people over in this part, and then there's the dragon people over in that part, and then there's the elves who live here, and you're looking at it and saying, is this even a map? I mean, anybody can draw a circle and draw little circles and put elves in one of them. And then you read it again and you look at certain aspects of character creation and you suddenly realize that if you put your finger on one part of that map, it is very likely that a whole bunch of sociocultural things will appear to you, and either they provide just enough to prompt your own creativity or personal approach to such issues to really make them seem like they're there, or they were thoughtful enough to put just enough of it into text and procedure so that it could be realized in play. It's hard to tell the difference, or if there is a difference between those two. Well, Proteus is very similar. The map is quite simplistic looking and has such features as, the Great Forest, which is a big forest, and a huge area that is more or less, at least at first glance, oh, look, China stuff. And a few other things like that. And, there's the city, which is super magical, the super magical city. And so at first you're thinking, all right, well, what am I really looking at here? And as with many of these things, you have numbers on the map and labeled places, and then a gazetteer to go through and a bit of a timeline. And so much of that in role-playing is so painfully trivial and irrelevant to play that I think a lot of us just skip it. Whereas I have learned, especially for the fantasy heartbreakers, that at least in some of them, the payoff for sitting down, putting your finger on the map and looking at the numbers and reading the entries is actually quite inspiring. You're saying, oh, I want to play there. And your mind spins into what could be happening in addition to what you're reading, or makes sense in the context of what you're reading. And all of a sudden, you not only do you want to play there, but you want to play this guy or this person that you can make up right there. And it is there's a nice synthesis between getting a good look at one of the spots and getting a good look at the options and saying, ooh, I want this option there. So anyway, it really is creatively a bit of a payoff, along with many other things. I would say that the humor throughout much of the text, or the snarky asides and stuff like that you find in there, I would call them cringy, except that my original Grey Magic is full of the same thing. I mean, in the very same way, and it's kind of this portrait of the eager role player of the early 90s, and the way that they liked to talk. We liked to talk. So, whatever I need to forgive in this text, sad to say that I think I'm pretty experienced with forgiving it for reasons. So, okay, what else have we here? What do you want to know? Well, it's intended to be rearranging a lot of tropes in very new configurations. And one of them, I mean, you could spot by a detail or two. One of them is that you can play these rats that are biggish, but otherwise pretty naturalistic rats. And you might have them being enchanters or, rogues of some kind or whatever. And they are, a playable character category and are extremely charming as soon as you get a look at them. The thought that nobody in a potential play group would, start waving their hand in the air and saying, me, I'm playing a rat, is hard to believe. There are a number of other options. Again, it's better to be location specific. You put your finger on a particular spot and then you think about, who or what could logically be there and doing what. And I hit upon not the main, if you will, the most focused upon area called Nathor, which includes, the magical city, and has it is purported to be sort of, the anti-slavery, the freedom city. And then you kind of look again and you say, oh my God, this is like this terrible surveillance state magocracy. This is kind of hardcore. There are a number of other places that interested me. partly because of one of the other playable categories, which are races, who are called the Undregi, and they are a subterranean humanoid group of people. They're small and they're pale, and they have weirdly big hands. Go figure. And they really focus a lot on enchantment. So that's kind of cool. And you read about them and you realize that they're kind of uptight. They hate religion and they are super super mercantile, and they live in a rather organized way in their main strongholds. Oh, but look, there's this little breakaway city. It says that there was a group of Undregi that decided to move over here and not be subject to the main ones. And they do trade. And interestingly enough, they do trade with the Stygians, who have a scatter-shot presence up and down one of the coasts. They live in an archipelago far off the map. And contact with this continent is not just happened, but it's not been that long. Okay, there's all these schools of magic. Well, the Stygians have a different school, and they don't have any of the schools that we've got in the main region that we play in. They have this very mentalist magic, and it operates differently. They also have gunpowder and firearms. They are also ethnically very much Black African, and there's ethnic mixes of various sorts. The map in the book covers a very large territory. There's lots of different sort of human variants of comportment and physique and stuff like that. And the Stygians, though, are definitely distinctive. So you have this other group, the Stygians, who are also they don't get along very well, or are rejected to some extent by certain power structures, mainly because they are a little, dangerous in their capabilities, and they're fascinated by enchantment. They'd never encountered enchantment before, and the people in the areas we're most familiar with, they have never encountered firearms before. So there's some culture there to look at. And the little city that I'm thinking of, that's called Trench, which was founded by this kind of breakaway group of Undregi, is a Stygian trading center, or point, for as far as the Stygians are concerned. Well, that means that these Undregi are a lot less uptight than the primary ones. And so Trench struck me as kind of a neat place. It wasn't quite as powerful or as fraught as some of the others, and it is this nice little cultural deal. And I really like the Undregi, so this seems like a fun place to play. So I went and I read about more of the little history and stuff there. So I made up 4 characters because I just wanted to poke around at the system a bit and enjoy playing just some stuff, some events, and attracted the attention of some of the people here. And we took some time at Spiel and Zeus to go and look at these characters that I mostly made up, or partly made up, and was joined by Johan and Figo and Helma. And they picked various characters. We have, I suppose you can see my enthusiasms were paralleled by theirs, or perhaps limited their choices. But we have, in fact, a Stygian, and we have a rat, and we have actually not an Undregi, but a human mutant. You see, magic is mutagenic, and you might develop mutations, and you might be born with mutations because of the magic, kicking around the land. So anyway, this particular person is a courtesan with a tail, and very, cultured in many ways. And I found through the point structure that it was perfectly reasonable that not only can she dance, but she can also kick your ass with martial arts, and that the tail is actually no small thing in this. So she's a pretty cool character, I found, if I do say so myself. And Figo picked her up and played her a little bit and learned a little bit more about how the numbers worked, and said, held it up, and you could see he owned this character, and I was like, this is strong, and went to town on playing her, and she quickly developed who she was. So the other two characters have also sort of stepped up. We only played a little bit of a fight, nothing too well grounded. I sort of took the zombie dogs that I found in there and threw a couple zombie dogs in there with some justification, came up with a little bit about the characters and where they were. This is Trench.
Oh, well.
But so right now it's not very clear like what you're going to do. This is obviously not an adventuring party or something like that. And we're just here to kind of throw the dice around and see what our characters do and get a feel for how this game is played. And here is my framework, just so we can play. There is an old Undregi who is actually from a nearby region called Sigil, which also has an Undregi kind of outpost, more connected to the original group. And he is old. He is an enchanter. He is focuses mostly on gems and jewelry, but he's old and blind, and seems kind of toward the end of his days. And the fun part is that he manages to persist because he has some helpful assistants. And he may not even be aware that his helpful assistants are rats. So, yeah, in fact, he may complain sometimes. It's starting to smell like rat around here. Clean this place up.
Sounds sort of like space rat.
Yeah, he's kind of in his. He's kind of. As I say, the Undregi are these pale people with bald heads and big hands. You can kind of see this aged guy, kind of in his little, crappy, hut-like thing built into a part of a cliff wall, maybe with shutters that you can slide apart, and that's where you would have him appraise your gems and things like that. But he mostly doesn't come out very much anymore. He sits under his blanket and talks a lot and explains what he's doing by feel, or has the assistant do something. Doesn't do very much, but someone is learning quite a lot about gem crafting and enchanting. And that's our character.
All right.
Yeah. I have a question. It says age.
Yes.
Seasons.
Seasons are 2 Earth years.
Okay. So I'm 24.
Yes.
And I'm 20.
Correct.
That's pretty accurate.
Okay.
Let's move to here. So this enchanter fellow is kind of like your mentor, although how aware he is of this is another question.
Well, I'm very aware of it.
Now, for Siobhan's situation, is that it may not be the most glamorous place to live, but there's not a lot of competition in your level of activity, especially because, well, various people from the Undregi Undercity they kind of like the hot mutant
Fair enough.
date. And so you have something of a clientele that is well behaved and appreciative, and people can go, non-Undregi can go into the Undercity. It's particularly the shallower portion. There's even a market in there and stuff like that. So sometimes you would go in there for social appointments or something like that. You might even have a place of your own, a modest place of your own there. But your primary residence would be up here among the other humans. So, but you have, like I said, you have a distinct clientele. You are not busy all the time. You are
living a decent life.
Yeah, it's pretty decent at this point. Yeah. This, as far as places to go, this is safer and more easygoing than most places on the continent that aren't overly controlled.